everyone. Welcome to Let's Go There. I'm your host, Chantal Beresford. I cannot wait for tonight's conversation. It's going to be good. It's going to be real. It's going to be relevant because we have real conversations here on my show. And today we're going to be talking about the journey of alopecia, but from a different perspective, from a male perspective, and just a journey that my new friend is going to share his personal story and journey through childhood and through adulthood. And I'm going to bring on no other McCair Tulloch to my show tonight. Hey, how are you?
I'm well, Chantal. Thank you so much for having me. So excited to join the Let's Go There conversation. Yes, I'm glad to be here.
Thanks for coming. I just cannot wait to dive in. I don't know too much of your story, so I'll hear it for the first time as well, so I cannot wait. But before we go into the conversation, I have a couple just questions for people to get to know you. Are you prefer socks or ties?
You know what? I'm somewhere right in between. I love ties, but I also I feel like the outfit is not complete without a sock that pops. So I like socks too. So I'm somewhere in the middle.
Yeah. Are you doing mix match socks?
Not tonight. Not today. You know, I have done it once or twice a few years back, but I like to wear socks that are a little provocative, a little, popping, but usually both the left and the right foot match. Usually.
That's good. So do you prefer baseball or basketball?
Basketball all day. I'm a lefty. I'm a shooter. You know what? I gotta go with the Raptors. Raptors. Growing up, I was a big Lakers fan, big Kobe fan. You know, I still have much respect for the Lakers organization, but it's not been the same for me since Kobe left the league. So I go with the Raptors.
Oh, that's good. Well, let's get right into the conversation today. And I just want to learn about your story. Like, before we actually go there, what are you doing for life? Are you into ministry? Do you work? Like, what are you doing for your for vocation life?
Yeah, so I'm a graduate student.
Okay.
I'm also a youth and young adults pastor, currently serving at a church in the city of Toronto. And I love Jesus. I love people. As I said, I love basketball. And, I'd like to say, I don't know if I love fashion per se, but I do have an affinity to personal style.
Okay.
I think growing up, I went to a private school for a private Christian school for much of my high school years. So university was when I really found myself stylistically. And I found that I was really drawn to, I really had a drawing to the 1960s. Like, I loved the mindset of many of the Black leaders then, but also the style, the approach, the fedoras, the glasses. Yeah. And I've embodied that within my own way. And it's kind of stuck with me. Since then.
Well, maybe later on in life, you'll have your own line in something.
Maybe.
Or is it in the works? No, I'm just joking.
We'll see.
Awesome. So you have experienced alopecia. What is alopecia?
Okay, so alopecia is an autoimmune disorder where the body sees the hair follicles, the hair cells, as bad cells. And instead of allowing them to grow, it actually attacks them out of an attempt to defend the body from bad cells. It attacks the good hair cells, which often results in hair loss. So there's a few different kinds of alopecia. Alopecia areata is one of the most one of the kinds of the forms of alopecia that most people that do have alopecia have, where it results in loss of hair. It results in patches. But then there's also alopecia totalis, where you lose everything on your head, and then alopecia universalis, where you lose all your hair everywhere. So throughout my journey with alopecia, which I'll talk a bit more about, I've kind of gone through each of those at different points in my life.
Wow.
So I've experienced the full spectrum.
All of it. So when did it start? How did you even know that you had this?
Yeah, so I was about 8 years old. So I think second grade at the time. And then I think I didn't even notice it at first, but my family noticed that there was a patch. I started to lose hair in the back, like one of the back corners of my head. And then shortly thereafter, another patch, then another patch. And then, before we could even get a grasp on what it was, everything was gone. I went to so many doctors to try to see what it was. Was there some trauma to my head that resulted in the hair loss? Was there something that happened? And as crazy as this is, a lot of the doctors that I went to at that time, some of them didn't even have language for what it was.
Really?
You know? Yeah, and they didn't know how to go about treating it. So it was tough because you're literally watching your hair go before your eyes, and you're trying to find something to grab onto, to salvage and to save it. And you know, it almost seemed as though there was nothing that could be done.
So were you like cutting your hair short constantly at 8 years old, like really low?
With the alopecia?
Yeah.
Or before?
No, with the alopecia.
Yeah, so I would keep it low, but eventually it got to the place where I lost everything by 9. So from 8 to 9, 8 was when the patches started. 9, I had no hair on my head, no eyebrows, no eyelash. I had nothing.
Nothing.
Right? Nothing at all. Nothing at all. And then eventually it grew back. So I went from having the universalis form of alopecia to having patches. Like, so from maybe I'd say like 9, like late 9, 10 and upward, it grew in patches. And you know, I would cut it low intentionally, but it would grow at such a rapid rate that if I wasn't cutting it every 2 to 3 days, there was a patch everywhere. So like, it was, you can imagine being a kid, you know, you really stand out, and people, classmates, teachers didn't really have language for it. And what do kids do when they don't understand something? Instead of asking questions, they make fun of you, you know?
So how did you handle that? How did your parents handle that? Were you like upset as a kid? Were you angry? Were you like, you know what, I don't really care if this is not affecting me? Like, how did you receive that?
It was tough. It was tough. I like to say that I am an introvert by nature, but looking back to how I was before alopecia and after alopecia, I would argue to some degree that I became an introvert in processing in processing the bullying, processing the pain of managing this new condition, because I found that it was hard to be outgoing. It was hard to be conversational, because I would see people looking, staring, pointing. I would hear the things that classmates would say, some very harmful things that even some of teachers would say as well. And of course, you know, going to the mall, going to different places, you know, people are always like, oh, look at that kid, look at that kid. So it was challenging. You know, I wouldn't say I was an angry kid or anything like that, but you know, I didn't really understand why. I definitely had quite a number of times where I cried and where I just really wondered, why me? Why did I have to go through something like this? You know, because I was like, I think with most conditions, you wonder, like, you didn't do anything to deserve this, right?
Yeah.
And you know, like, if I was a bad kid, I could maybe understand, but I was chill. Like, I was cool with everybody. And then, you know, I would think that people were cool with me, but it didn't take too long before I realized that some of the people that, you know, acted okay around me to my face were some of the ones, like, with the bullies, pointing me out during lunchtime, during time at the playground, and saying some really harmful things.
So did you have to take anything? Like, were you taking any medication for it? Were you going to doctor visits often? Like, what was that? What did it look like day to day?
Yeah, so I mean, like, my family, you know, they were really, really helpful, and they really wanted to kind of get to the bottom of this. So I did go to different doctors, did go to seek out different forms of treatment to see what could be done. Some tried to treat it topically, which, you know, like, a topical remedy for an internal problem can only do so much.
That can preach right there. Go on, that can preach right there. Say that again.
a topical remedy for an internal problem can't address the root of the issue.
Wow.
Right? So I was applying creams trying to rectify this issue, but really and truly, as it's an autoimmune disorder, it was pointing, like, the external hair loss was pointing to something else going on inside that needed to be addressed. Right. And it's only over time that I came to discover that, like, doing more research, going to doctors that had better understanding of how to manage it. But it was tough. Like, I remember in particular, there was one form of treatment. I don't even remember what it was called, but I think they were trying to stimulate the hair cells. So, like, they would apply pressure to my scalp, like using some kind of tool or something. And then it resulted in it resulted in me having, like, I guess when you're bald, your head is fairly sensitive, right? And at a young age too, I was young, right? So I actually had dents and, like, like deep kind of grooves within my head. And with that, in addition to having patches, it was tough. Like, I distinctly remember people who I considered to be friends, like, calling me, like, if they didn't say I looked like the globe, or if they didn't call me Cancer Boy, then they said that I have potholes. Like, they called me potholes because of the indentation from the treatment, and, like, it was tough. It was really tough. Like, I felt I was extremely reserved. I would draw back a lot, and like, if not for a strong support at home, it really would have been much tougher to deal with.
So do you feel like people thought, I'm thinking, like, oh, you're a guy, like, who cares about their hair as a guy? Like, do you feel like you had identity with your hair? Like, did that cause you to be more aware of your features? 'Cause a lot of times we think that more a female thing, not a male.
No, it honestly, it affects men as well. I remember once, and this was in my teenage years, maybe about 13. I went to an event, and an older gentleman came up to me. He's like, "Young man, why in the world would you do that? Why would you cut off your hair like that?" He's like, "Don't you know there are old men that want to grow out their hair, and you're so young and you're bald? Why would you do that?" I'm
Wow.
like, "Excuse me, I have a condition called."
Wow.
And then he was extremely apologetic after the fact.
Yeah.
But it's as though people feel that they need a reason to be kind, right?
Wow.
And, like, it was tough because, I mean, most people saw me as the weird kid. I was kind of like an alien because I didn't look like everyone else. So a lot of people would keep their distance. A lot of parents, they didn't, like, people with conditions, you don't know, like, is it something that's contagious? Is it something that happens? So, stay away from that kid, So it was tough. It was tough because older people who I think would have a bit more sensitivity with addressing a child with an unusual condition, right? They didn't,
Wow. So did you feel like you lost your voice? Like, how does this now progress your teens? You're an adult. Like, how does this affect your calling, what you want to move into, dealing with being bullied and people, like, looking at you, calling you names? What was the effects of that?
Honestly, with the way you started that question, I think you summed it up so well. And I did. To answer your question, I lost my voice. In fact, before having alopecia, I used to write a lot of poetry as a kid, kindergarten, grade 1. And believe it or not, like, the school that I started off going to, I actually wrote a poem for the kindergarten classes to use as they were graduating into grade 1. It was called The Next Step. Like, up until 3rd, 4th, even, like, 6th grade, the school would use this poem. But, like, I found that because of how my nature changed in light of the condition, I stopped writing, I stopped speaking. It's not that I didn't have a voice, but I lost it. I lost it because of the difficulty of really processing reality with this new condition. And I think it was when I was around 12 years old, or just before I turned 12, actually. It's crazy how God works things out. But I was able to actually get connected to this NBA player who recently got drafted to the Raptors at the time, Charlie Villanueva. He had the exact same condition as me. I saw him playing, and I was like, okay, you know what? That guy looks like he has alopecia. I'm not sure. And then somehow, I was able to actually get connected with him. And we met, we spoke, and there were a lot of other people around, but for like 2 hours, it was just me and him talking about our condition, talking about processing the reality of that. And for the first time in 12 years of my life, I saw somebody that looked like me. I saw somebody that didn't see their condition as a limitation, but they were able to go to the highest level of professional sport and thrive, right? And with that, I found that it awakened in me a different confidence, a desire to not be defined by what some would consider to be a deficiency, but to really
Mm-hmm.
see that, if God could do it for him, that God could do it for me also. And I it was almost like an instant shift. Of
That's
course there was
amazing.
yeah, of course there was some
Amazing.
gradual progression
Yeah.
that came with it, but immediately from that time, something changed in me, and I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful for that connection because it literally it changed. Like God used that moment to change everything.
Did you stay in contact with him
Yeah,
after that?
we're still in touch to this day. Still in
Wow,
touch to
that's
this day.
amazing. That is so cool. Wow.
Yeah.
So from that, what was some notable things that really ignited in you after that conversation that you could say, you know what, you can point back to that meeting, like
Mhm.
did you start writing again? Did you have a confidence? Did you walk differently? Did you carry yourself differently? What did that look
Right.
like after that?
Yeah. So for me, I think because he was a basketball player, it it
Mm.
it 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 shifted my aspirations. I really wanted to go to the NBA. He was 6'11". I prayed, God, I want to be 6'11". He went to the University of Connecticut. I'm like, God, this is. I told all my friends. I was talking with a friend of mine the other day. He's like, man, I remember back in grade 7, grade 8, nobody could tell you anything. You said you're going to UConn, and that's it, right? And I really wanted to kind of live my life in light of the inspiration that I found in him. But with that, I found that I was a lot more outgoing, still a bit reserved, still
Mhm.
introverted by nature, but not to the degree that I was hiding who I was. Like I started playing basketball. I started, meeting new people. It was still fairly challenging because, to add some context, the year that I met him, like this was January of 2000, and I want to say six or something like that, right?
Mhm.
But the fall before that, I actually transitioned schools, and I think that was one of the most difficult transitions I've ever experienced because
Mhm.
though I was bullied significantly, though I was made fun of at my former school, I had gotten acquainted with dealing with that there. And
Mhm.
then the idea of going to a new school now in junior high, meeting new people and trying to adapt, it was like, whoa, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I remember I cried. I begged my parents, please don't let me leave this school. Like, I don't
Mhm.
want to go to this other school. And it was tough. Like I tried to use my hat as my shield, right?
Mm.
And you can
Mm.
imagine at a Christian school where you wear uniform, right? You're not really allowed to wear hats in classes.
Yes.
So some of my teachers, they were a bit hesitant to allow me to, but I tried
Mm.
to explain to them the conditions. So they said, okay, you know what? Until you get comfortable, you can, some of them said that
Yeah.
you could do it. One of the music teachers in particular, he was extremely kind. But I remember as soon as people saw what was going on with my hair, the stares, the comments, the mockery. It was so tough. So it was in that same school year, that same
Mm.
academic year, that I was able to meet Charlie, to meet the NBA player. And yeah, like I started writing again. I started dreaming again. Like,
Mm.
I wasn't even really dreaming. I was kind of like going through the motions, doing life, but not really feeling that I had a sense of purpose, like I had a sense of value, like I had a sense of meaning. If not for my family and for the haven that I found within my church home as well, like I think I really would have been a dead man walking, a dead man walking.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
So there's no way looking at you, I would assume like you went through all this stuff. I'm like, oh, and maybe do you find it easier now that you're older that you are just balding? People are thinking versus when you were 12 or 13. That's more not regular for a 12-year-old to have his hair cut low. But now that you're older, do you find you still have to deal with the similar things as you were younger, like the stares or, oh, is there something wrong with you? Or like those
Mhm.
questions? Do you have to deal with that still now?
No, 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 certainly not as much. In fact, when I came out with my story, when I first shared about the condition that I had, a lot of people were extremely surprised because I had some brothers actually reach out to me and say, listen, man, like you rocking the bald look so young actually inspired me to cut my hair off. I had no
Wow.
clue. I had no clue that you had a condition going on like that. So now being older, it is a bit easier. Of course, there's still some internal effects of the experiences when I was younger that have that I've had to work to unearth and kind of work to get to the bottom of. Because with things like being mistreated, being mishandled, and even like with people who you attempted to trust and attempted to give space to, give voice to, that really breached that in some of the comments that they said or some of the things that they would do to make fun of you. It really made me struggle with trusting people, with making new friends and with really connecting. So I have found that even though outwardly it's easier to navigate, I've found that if you don't address some of those underlying things that affected you from you were younger, it can really have an adverse effect on the way that you're able to navigate in the present moment.
So what would you say do you have any triggers?
You know what? That's a great question, and I'd say honestly, I don't. As far as my condition is concerned, I don't have any triggers, but I would say that it has birthed a greater sense of empathy for those who are often misunderstood. So I don't know if I'd consider it a trigger, but I do feel deeply for others when I see them mistreated, when I see others mishandled. I think I naturally have an affinity to the misfits. I'm drawn to people who are misunderstood, even if their condition is different from mine. I really have a desire to get to know them, to hear their stories, because I found even throughout high school, throughout university, some of the deepest connections were with people who were the most often misunderstood. And people thought that they didn't speak. People thought that they didn't have anything valuable to say. But it's not that they didn't. It's just that a lot of people didn't take the time to see them beyond their differences. So, I mean,
Wow.
I'm deeply drawn to people like that. And I am, it hurts to see people mishandled that are misunderstood. But I think based on my experience with alopecia, in addition to it drawing me to them, it really pushes me to help others to see people beyond how they look, beyond what they look like, because there's a story that each of us carry that makes us who we are.
That's so good. So would you say that you found your calling, or like I know that you preach at our church, and like you're a very good communicator. Do you feel like that's your background has really helped you to get you here of finding where you want to go outside being a basketball player?
Absolutely, absolutely. And I can't say that the healing process could be totally experienced without my surrendering to Jesus. I know this is not church or anything, but I think that for me, one of the greatest sources of meaning, of belonging, of identity was really coming to a discovery of who Jesus was and who he said that I was. Because I really did try to overcompensate and to make up for the areas that caused me to be different from others. Like I remember trying to dress a certain way, trying to talk a certain way, and not truly accepting myself for who I was. And I found that it wasn't until I came to a place where I understood that though I looked different from most of the people, from everyone that I knew growing up, my difference was not a deficiency, but it was actually my distinction.
Come
And
on, go
I,
deeper in
I,
that. That's good.
yeah, I think I came to the realization that alopecia, though it's an autoimmune condition that affected me externally, I think the enemy used the condition to attack me in the area of my identity because it was my voice that God called me to use.
Mm.
And that was what was affected, like the ripple effect of the external evidence of this internal problem was the erasure, the elimination, and the hiding of my voice,
Wow.
And then it's in accepting Jesus and allowing him to heal those parts of me that were affected, that were wounded by this condition, alopecia, that allowed me to become more confident in saying, okay, you know what, God, I'm who you say I am. Like, whether I have an afro or I'm completely bald, whether I have a beard or not, whether I have, this or I don't have that. I am who you say I am, and my identity is not in my hair. My identity is not in how I look, but my identity is in who you say I am. And I found that people didn't really begin to accept me for me until I did. Like, I tried so hard to fit in. I tried so hard to fit in, and it was impossible. It wouldn't work. It's like we fight so hard not to stand out when the reason why it's so easy to stand out is because we were called to,
Come on.
And I think that it was only in accepting that I found people started to be drawn to me and accept me for me when I began to accept me for who God said.
That is so powerful. A lot of times we're looking for other people to empower us, to give us, find our confidence, find our motivation, but really not till you accept yourself, that you know that you can do it, that opens actually, that's still like unlocks a lot of doors for people when you accept yourself versus waiting for someone else to give you the key to unlock yourself. I think too many of us are waiting for that. We're waiting for that opportunity. We're waiting for people to say, hey, is this looking good on me? If you like the shirt, wear the shirt. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if you feel you're called to speak. And I think we put too many trust in other people that's not their lane. Like, and so we're waiting for their criticisms or their ideas when that was not even their lane. So they can't even give appropriate advice or counseling or direction or guidance when they have no experience for that lane.
Right. That's it.
I think that's so powerful. And so what would you tell yourself if you went back to you being 12 years old? Like, what would you now, looking as an adult in your 20s, what would you say to yourself if you could give some like comfort or words of wisdom? What would you tell yourself?
You'll see that it all makes sense. You'll see that it all makes sense. You don't understand it now, but you'll see that it all makes sense. It had to be like this. Not because of anything that you did, but because in order for you to have the connection that you do with the misunderstood and with the misfits, in order for you to be empowered in your voice in the way that God wants to use you, it had to be like this, but it will all make sense. Wow.
And if you heard that back then, I guess we probably wouldn't believe it because we don't know what's coming in the future.
No, you know what? If I heard it around the time that I met the NBA player that I met, Charlie, then I think it would click. It would click a bit. It would still be hard to see the vastness of what that meant for me. But I would say, you know what? Okay, maybe you're onto something. I definitely need to see more though. I need to see more in order to see what you're saying. But yeah, like I every connection was divinely aligned, from meeting Charlie to being bullied to finding my identity not in who I was. Because I found a lot of my peers, even though they didn't have the same condition as me, so many others struggled in the area of their identity. And I think for me, I learned to accept myself for who I was at a much earlier age because alopecia expedited the process.
That's good. That's so good. And I think that's maybe why young people really like you, because you really identify being young. In those young formative years, people don't know who they are. Kids don't know who they are. They're looking to other people and they're following the trends. Next week it's this sneaker or this song or this TikTok. It's like trying to keep up. Like, young people are always on the pulse with trends. And sometimes you're on the pulse of trends, but you still can't find out who you are because you're just a trend, not who you're uniquely God created you to be.
Come on.
And I find we have too many trend people like, love this music and they can't make their own. Like, God has a gift in each person that He has gave you from the day one, but we are trying to sound like everybody else. And so we all have our own sound, like even our voices. People sometimes like growing up, they had like an accent that they kind of put on. I'm like, you don't even sound that way. Like, talk normal, because you want to sound like somebody. But I think that's part of what you said, that you even found your identity before some of your peers, because you had alopecia, you had to deal with that and you had to confront that, versus a lot of times it can take us a long time to release ourselves. There's people in their 30s and 40s don't even know who they are. Like, there's a lot of people trying to figure out, who am I? Like, what's my purpose in life? What am I supposed to do?
Right.
I was one of those people. I'm like, what, God, what are you calling me to? And I realized something that God years told me was, whatever I put in your hand, be faithful and I'll give you revelation. And I was always looking other places for things because I liked what they were doing, but like, I feel like that wasn't my thing, until I realized just being me is who God's calling me to be. Was like, wow, like, he actually wants to use me just for who I am. I don't have to be anything like a lawyer, judge, or whatever that is. Like, if I never became like a known figure in life, it was okay just being me. And I think it's, even though I know God has gifts and talents and more for me, but if that's all that the direction God wanted me to go, it's okay. And so my last question for you to close up our conversation is, what are some truths that you held on to during those hard times and even in your adult? Like, what are some things that you hold on to keep you growing? Are you a journaler? Do you like hold on to scripture or some special quotes that make you feel strong in areas of times maybe weakness or when you're down?
So a few things. Being a believer, scripture has been one of my go-tos. Romans 8:28, and we know that all things work together for the good of them that love God and are the called according to his purpose. That's a verse that I hold near and dear to my heart. In addition to that, I'm a writer. Having a love for poetry has helped, because even before I began to communicate, before I began speaking, preaching, poetry was my outlet. And then I found my voice through spoken word. So I would write myself clear, and then I would learn to speak that out through spoken word. So poetry has always been a means of escape for me, and also a means of clarifying thoughts and working through difficult times. And there are a few quotes. Some personal and some that I've heard. So one by Dr. Darius Daniels that has stuck with me is, what makes you awkward in one season makes you relevant in the next.
Come on.
That it hit different because of some of the things that I've been throughout my journey, and seeing how over time it all does make sense. And I think I shared it a little bit earlier. One of the words that God gave me that I've clung to, and that I continue to hold near and dear to my heart, is the fact that your difference is not a deficiency. It's actually your distinction. Because we think that we're lacking. We often think that we're lacking because of our difference. So we try to suppress and hide our difference out of a desire to fit in like everyone else, be with everyone else. When maybe it's so difficult to fit in because you were graced and created to stand out. So I've learned to lean into my difference.
That's good. That's so good. Thank you for sharing those truths. I think a lot of us can identify with that, like trying to be like everyone else, but maybe we're called to stand out. Especially as Christians, we all are called to stand out. And so thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for being vulnerable. Thank you for just being real. And I feel like a lot of people are going to resonate with this story, especially males, because I think males don't talk a lot about even their childhood, maybe being bullied. And so I am excited for my kids, because my kids love your preaching, like love. They're like, oh, Mr. McCair is so powerful.
Your kids are amazing. Your kids are amazing.
Thank you. I know so many people will be touched by this, and I will catch you backstage after I close up here. And
thank you so much, Pastor Chantal, for having me. It's been such an honor. I love this show. I love the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
I can't wait to see more of what God is doing through you with this conversation and with this show.
I appreciate it, and we will talk soon. Hey guys, thank you so much for tuning in today. If you have not liked or smashed the subscribe button, make sure you subscribe today, because I think many people would be very blessed by hearing McCair's story. What a phenomenal story. And I think we all can learn that no matter what you've been through, even if you've been bullied, maybe you've had lost jobs or lost loved ones, that God has a call for you and God has so much in store. And right at the time, we don't understand the why, but maybe God will give clear revelation in the years or the days to come. And so thank you for tuning in today. Cannot wait for next week. And before that, make sure you share the link with someone, because someone needs to hear this. It's going to be so good. And so see you back here Tuesday at 8 as we talk. Next week, I want to tell you, we're going to talk about money. Oh, it's a good one. This story is good as this couple got out of debt, and they have a lot of good nuggets to share with us. So talk to you guys next week.